Hi there. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Claire Morin from Unum, and I'm joined today by three speakers, Sharlyn Lauby, Rob Hecker, and Ellen McCann. As you can see from the agenda, we're here today to talk about how the pandemic is reshaping the workplace and benefits. I'm going to start just with a few housekeeping items. You'll see that you can ask questions through the chat function. We're going to go through the presentation and we'll include a good amount of time at the end for Q&A. We'll do our best to answer all your questions then, and we may be able to answer some of the questions along the way. Finally, after today's session, you'll receive the recording and a copy of the presentation. Thank you so much. So I'm so thrilled today to welcome our three panelists. We have with us Sharlyn Lauby. Sharlyn is the author of HR Bartender and the president of ITM Group, Inc., a Florida-based training and human resources consulting firm focused on helping companies retain and engage talent. Prior to starting ITM Group, Sharlyn was vice president of human resources at Right Management Consultants, which is one of the world's largest organizational consulting firms. Publications such as Reuters, the New York Times, ABC News, and the Wall Street Journal have sought out her expertise on topics related to human resources and the workplace. Sharlyn launched HR Bartender to provide a friendly place for everyday workplace issues. It's been recognized as one of the top 5 business blogs read by HR professionals by SHRM. So welcome, Sharlyn. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone listening in today.
And our next panelist is Rob Hecker. Rob is currently the Vice President of Global Total Rewards, responsible for Unum's health, medical, and retirement plans, well-being strategies, and compensation and rewards programs. Prior to moving into his current role, Rob was the Vice President of the National Client Group Services at Unum, responsible for developing client service delivery strategies for Unum's 2,000-plus employees customer segment. He's performed many roles in his 30-plus years with Unum. He's also an active community leader. Rob has served on the boards of the Unum Charitable Foundation, the Chattanooga Why Me Breast Cancer Organization, the Chattanooga Humane Educational Society, as well as Unum's United Way Leadership Council. So welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Claire, and I'm great to be here this afternoon.
And finally, Ellen McCann. Ellen is an acclaimed national speaker on leave management issues, including the FMLA and the ADA. She's a certified trainer for SHRM and CE Credit. As Assistant Vice President Legal Counsel for Unum's Employment Law Group, Ellen advises human resources on all employment-related legal issues. She also provides legal support to Unum's Absence Management Center, which provides leave administration services to its customers. Presently, Unum's leave administration product includes administration of close to 200 state leave laws in addition to FMLA, and it covers close to 3 million lives. So welcome, Ellen.
Thank you, Claire. I'm happy to be here.
And thank you to our audience for joining us. I know you're all extremely busy. Out of all job functions, human resources is a critical one right now. We're here today to look at some insights we gained from a recent employer survey that Unum conducted. So I'm going to do a quick introduction to the survey, and then we're going to move through some of the key insights, and our panelists are going to really sort of reflect and offer some commentary, and of course, taking your questions, so please send them as we go. So in early June, we did this survey. We had this question: what will the new benefits paradigm look like? You know, we're moving through such disruption right now. We wanted to get a sense of how are employers planning for this new future? How are they changing their benefits or their leave strategies? You know, talking to Rob Hecker here today in a conversation, he was saying this is a real paradigm shift we're moving through. So we wanted to know, well, you know, what is that forward-looking vision like? So from June 11 to the 16th, 2020, We surveyed 407 employers from a wide range of industries and company sizes. You can see on this slide here that we had roughly half with less than 500 employees, and then the other half more than 500 employees, with a quarter in that 2,000 plus. We spoke to people involved in employee benefits decision-making or administration. So we'll move through some of the insights from what we asked them. And clearly we asked them these questions at the beginning of June. And right now it's, July 21st, and time and change is just accelerating. So some of the insights, are shifting. But these are the 4 key insights that emerged. We're going to move through these in the discussion today. Number 1, work from home taboos dissolve. We found more than half, 56% of employers plan to give their employees flexibility to work from home even after the pandemic has finished. So that was an interesting point we'll look at. The second key insight, employers get the message on paid leave. Almost half, 44% of employers said they will likely expand their employer paid leave benefits next year. Only a quarter said that they wouldn't. The third key insight, benefits are being pulled in opposite directions. More than half, 57% of respondents plan to change their benefit mix, their non-medical insurance benefits. So we're going to look at that. We're going to dive into some of the data there. Finally, enrollment meets social distancing. So looking ahead, we are seeing a rise in planning for, which is perhaps very obvious, less in-person meetings. So these are the 4 key insights. So we're going to start with the first one, work from home becomes mainstream. Just a quick slide here. This was surveying in early June. A few points to notice: on average, 60% of an organization's employees were working from home when the pandemic sort of hit. By early June, about 57% had about half or fewer than half of their employees back on site. Clearly, right now, there are surges occurring in states across the country. This is going to be shifting. This is where we're going to sort of bring in the panel. This is an interesting point that we asked of employers. We said, will you allow the flexibility to work from home even after the COVID-19 pandemic is over? And as you can see here, across the board, yes. So Sharlyn, I wanted to bring you in here just to kick off this discussion on what your thoughts are on this sort of working from home shift.
Well, I think that if we, look back in time to sheltering in place, back in February or March, many organizations, if you had asked them the question, hey, would you consider, having your employees do remote work or working from home, they probably would have said no. We don't believe that this is something that makes sense for our organization. And so when sheltering in place started happening, I believe organizations really did have to, I guess for lack of a better way of putting it, make some decisions on the fly, and they sent employees home, and employees have done a great job over the past few months of figuring it out. How do I remain productive? How do I, communicate with my coworkers? And what organizations are seeing right now is, we can get work done having a distributed workforce. And so I believe that what we're seeing now is organizations asking themselves some questions about what does working from home, you were talking about the ability to have employees still work from home in the months to come. What does working from home 2.0 look like? I'm starting to hear about companies that are saying, how can we make your internet better, or how can we get you a chair? Because, when your back's not happy, you're not happy, and you don't do your best work. But, what does working from home 2.0 look like?
such a great point. And Rob, I'd love to ask you about this in your role, sort of running the HR organization at Unum with more than 10,000 employees. What are your thoughts on this and this flexibility we're seeing?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and as you mentioned earlier, I do think there's been a bit of a paradigm shift in terms of how employees are thinking about the workplace. And I think as we know, employees were very resilient and quickly moved employees out of the to home to work remotely, and they did that. A lot of employees that could do that did that very effectively. I know Unum did a really good job at that. But now employees are starting to ask themselves some questions about, so what is the future of the workplace? For a lot of employers, and the notion of how do you drive innovation and collaboration if your employees aren't in the physical aren't in your physical space. How do you do that? How do you continue to that? And technology certainly enables some of that, but there's something lost that when employees aren't together, physically together. The other piece is a lot of companies viewed their physical space as an important statement about their brand and the kind of company they were, and it became a piece of their value proposition that they offered to potential recruits. And so now, when that physical space it takes on a different meaning, what is the purpose of space, and how do they leverage that to still be meaningful? And I think it's interesting. I think one of the things that it occurs to me is that we talk about what does the new benefits package look like, and I think one of the things that's going to emerge in the new world is this whole notion around flexibility and employers that can be flexible around where employees work, because I think that's going to be an important thing employers are going to be asking for, is greater flexibility for a whole host of reasons. That may in fact be a new differentiator in terms of if you think about your benefits portfolio.
So true. And Ellen, I'd love to bring you in too. I know the audience, a lot of customers with us today, and you were appearing in a lot of our webinars just as soon as the pandemic hit, as soon as those leave laws were coming out, and you were unpacking it. What would you say to this shift to the work from home for a lot of industries and this flexibility?
Right, Claire, and I think, and I agree with what Sharlyn and Rob have talked about, and I think one other issue we've seen is there's even flexibility in what employers are expecting from their employees working from home from what we saw in 1.0 or phase 1. Phase 1, a lot of employers were just get everyone home, be as flexible as you can, let them get their work done. You recognize they're doing a lot of different things, they're juggling a lot of personal demands with work. And a lot of employers, quite frankly, had what many have called COVID performance standards, right? And that was, hey, as long as my employees get anything done, I'm happy, because there's so many demands going on, or they might not have the right equipment yet. What I think we're starting to see is, now that we're 4.5 or so months into this, employers are saying, wait a second, COVID performance is not enough to sustain our business needs, but they're still recognizing they need to be flexible, but they might be flexible in different areas or on different topics. So for instance, it may be, hey, we'll still be flexible in how you get your work done. You can be at the kitchen table versus having a dedicated office like we used to require before COVID. Or you can work in the evenings if that works for you, and that's when you can get your work done. So I think the flexibility is still key, but one of the things I'm seeing is employers are changing the topics that they really need to be flexible on, because they're finding that the work performance has to be there and has to be solid, but how you let the employee get the work done is really where the flexibility needs to come in. And that's been a little bit of a shift, I think, for some employers from how they dealt with this in phase 1.
That's fascinating and true, and particularly as we're seeing all the news headlines, any sense that it was going to be a simple return to work, I think clearly by now we're realizing it isn't. We really don't know what's coming next. So that flexibility just is a key. The business strategy just makes a lot of sense. We'll move on now. That was kind of our opening of the sort of landscape. So we'll now get into some of the benefits and leave sort of issues. Our second big insight is employers get the paid leave message. So the pandemic has sharply revealed the need for employees to take time off work, right, to recover from the illness or to look after their family. We asked employers this question: will you expand paid leave benefits in the next 10 months? As you can see from the graphic, 44% said they probably or definitely will expand their paid leave. 32% said they might or might not. And only 24% said they probably or definitely will not. So that was sort of interesting to see. We then have, and this hasn't appeared yet in the report, but this is actually now looking into the company size, so a breakdown below 500 employees versus more than 500. And of course, with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, there was a paid leave element there. So here you can see that breakdown by company size. So Ellen, as someone who really specializes in leave management best practices from that view, sort of as legal counsel, what are your thoughts on these numbers?
Claire, I think these numbers really, from my perspective, they're very positive numbers as well, because what we're seeing is that employers are really recognizing that perhaps their paid leave programs pre-COVID, they just weren't robust enough. They didn't have enough in place to really help their employees in a time where employees really, again, had struggles, had issues that kept them from being able to work, and maybe had to make a choice between getting paid and taking care of a child who is home because they didn't have paid leave there. So I think a lot of employers have recognized the importance of paid leave to helping their employees have a good balance between home and work, but also allowing them to be able to weather a storm like this. And, you know, as employers know, many employers are already covered under the FMLA, but that provided unpaid leave, and at least initially didn't really cover some of the events that employees were experiencing. The Families First Coronavirus Act passed, and it did cover the corona experience or some of those reasons why employees needed to be out. And it did, of course, provide for paid leave in some circumstances and through an expansion of FMLA as well. But that only applied to employers that had less than 500 employees. So we had a host of employees that worked for larger employers that may not have had enough paid leave to get them through some of these issues. So I think it's really good that employers are recognizing, and I frankly don't think it's really surprising that they're recognizing that they weren't prepared for this event, and they'll be better prepared next year because they're going to add some more paid leave to their programs.
Yeah, right. And Sharlyn, I wonder what your thoughts are, maybe even remaining competitive as an employer here. What are your thoughts on these numbers?
Oh, I agree. Absolutely. I mean, you know, if we take COVID and sort of put it on the side, employers are always looking for the best talent, bringing those individuals into the organization and then retaining them. And offering paid leave benefits is part of that package. As the talent market continues to be challenging, and I believe it is. You know, it's interesting because I talk to recruiters all the time who, even though, you know, we hear about unemployment numbers or we hear about furloughs, we're still hearing about companies that are that want to retain the people that they've brought into the organization over the past couple of years, or maybe even yesterday. They want to retain talent, and the way that they do that is by making sure that they have a competitive benefits package. And now more than ever, paid leave benefits are one of those things that's bubbling up to the top as a must-have benefit.
Right. Rob, I wonder if you could weigh in also, maybe what are some best practices to keep in mind if employers are looking to expand paid leave?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things to keep in mind. You know, oftentimes we think about paid leave as for, you know, new moms and dads, and that's the primary beneficiary of those leaves. But I think they actually have a broader application for all sorts of caregiver kind of challenges. And so you think about caregiver leave is another one that's emerging. So I think that how we define leave and who it applies to, I think, is becoming a much a broader definition, and it actually does kind of there are a number of different demographics that it impacts and find value in leave. So I think that's important, because I think in the past people have thought about it pretty kind of narrowly, and it actually has a much broader application. The other thing the way we think about it is leave is just one of a whole portfolio of benefits that we provide our employees. And so I think it's really important to look at, as you think about adding a new benefit, adding a new leave program, how does it fit with your broader portfolio? Does it make sense? Does it align? Is it the right investment you want to make? Are there other investments you want to make? And so I think you have to look at those things holistically, because I suspect that most employers are really challenged to figure out how do they provide a really competitive portfolio, but also manage the additional expense that goes along with that. So I think it's always important to not only look at your whole portfolio holistically and figure out where these things fit, but also to keep in mind that that you have to have a diverse portfolio in order to meet the different needs of your employees.
Right. And Ellen, from a legal perspective, is there anything sort of you'd suggest employers keep top of mind as they're doing this planning?
The one thing they really need to do before they even start planning what their paid leave program will look like is make sure they're familiar with any of the paid leave laws that already exist and apply to them. So what we've seen is we have some very COVID-specific paid leave laws that have passed, particularly in some counties. So we're not just talking about the state level. You have to make sure there are no laws that apply at the municipal level as well. And we've seen some counties and some states pass laws that actually do expand that Families First Coronavirus Act protection, or the same leave reasons, to larger employers. So first you want to make sure what you're already legally required to provide, and make sure your policy intersects with that. So if your goal is to provide a consistent leave program across the country to all of your employees and you really want parity, you want to make sure that your program takes into account any leave that you're mandated by law to provide, and so that you're making sure your program is compliant with those laws, but also writing it in such a way that your program does count towards your obligations under those laws, so you don't end up with employees in states that have mandated laws being given much more generous benefits than employees in other states, if in fact your goal is to have one kind of holistic, uniform policy throughout the country. So you absolutely have to do your research, figure out what you have to provide, and then that's your basis for deciding what your program will look like.
That's great recommendation. And just bring it back to your first point of how the pandemic has it's revealed many things around the world, and certainly, as you said, it's perhaps revealed just the need for the resilience of the company, right? To be able to let people adapt to these fast changing times. Just a note for the audience, this is such a sort of important area, and I'll mention this again at the end, but in mid-August, we're actually going to be doing our next webinar, really looking into this paid leave landscape. We're bringing in some other experts as well. So that's great. Let's move on to the next key insight, benefit planning trends. So we asked the question, given what you know about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on businesses and workers, which of the following changes specific to the non-medical insurance benefits offered to your employees is your organization considering in the next 12 months? So I'll show you the slide here that shows sort of all the options. So the answer that came in was showing 57% of employers we surveyed. And again, this is sort of across industries, across verticals, across company sizes. But just sort of a snapshot, 57% said they are expecting to change their non-medical insurance benefits. Of these, the majority, so sort of 4 out of 5 of them, are looking to expand their coverage of non-medical insurance benefits. The biggest number, 31%, are adding new or expanding their wellness benefits. We called this out specifically as physical as well as mental health benefits. So that's 31%, the majority of those adding more. 15% will shift more of the benefits cost to the employer. 3% are looking to add or expand employer-paid benefits, and 2% are looking to add or expand employee-paid benefits. Then on the other side of this, those reducing the coverage, 20% plan to shift more of the benefits cost to employees, 18% plan to reduce employer-paid coverage levels, and 10% will drop one or more employer-paid benefits. So everyone listening today, I'm sure, is fitting in there somewhere. Rob, I would love for you to weigh in here, and I'm actually on the next slide, we'll look sort of one level deeper here by company size, and sort of see, again, with that split, under 500 employees, over 500 employees, not a lot of difference here, actually. I'd love you, though, to sort of just walk us through what strikes you here as some key takeaways of how you're seeing employees changing their planning.
Yeah, I think, it's a really challenging time for employers to kind of figure out, how do I continue to have, and we've said this before, a competitive contemporary benefits package when there's clearly a lot of pressure, financial pressure and so forth. And so, the way I think about this is, this is a really good time for employers to kind of step back and look at their portfolio and really figure out how do they optimize and rationalize their benefits so that they're meaningful for their employees. So for example, given the current environment, does it make sense to still offer things like commuter subsidies and gym memberships and things like that, when maybe in fact there'd be greater value to provide an employee additional child care benefits? So the way I think about it is, how do you manage the current pie that you have and allocate it differently so you get the most bang for the buck, as I would think about it. And I think that's a way to think about how you manage, in the current environment. The other point that I would make, and is, as a lot of companies are really trying to manage probably rising medical costs, that seems to have, you always have 4 or 5, 6% year over year medical inflation, and all other costs being driven by COVID. It's also a good opportunity to look at those employee paid or voluntary kinds of benefits that are no cost to the employer, but add value to that portfolio. And I think there's a whole host of those things that address a lot of different employee needs that would be highly valued, because they're, you can obviously purchase them in the workplace, but they also meet employees, a certain set of employees' needs. And so I think there's a lot of different things that employees can think through to kind of readjust and optimize what they're offering.
That's great. And I'd love to ask you too, actually, about that point of 31% expanding physical, emotional well-being, sort of wellness benefits. I know this is an area you speak a lot about. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I think what we're seeing is that this issue, mental health issues in the workplace, are going to be emerging is one of the biggest challenges that employers are going to face over the next 12 to 8 months. And, employees are experiencing a lot of stress and anxiety, being socially isolated, dealing with child care issues, elder care issues, a host of things, social unrest. It's a very tough time for a lot of people. And so as a result, employees if they're not already seeing, or going to see increased levels of employee absence related to behavioral health related issues. And so, I know at Unum we have been very focused on this. And so what we've been trying to do is try to address this through expanding our health and well-being programming, which ranges anywhere from virtual behavioral health counseling, providing access to mindfulness tools. We're providing employees additional financial planning support. We're, as many employers, I imagine, if you have a 401k plan, you're seeing employees taking unprecedented levels of withdrawals from those plans. And so how do you help those employees get back on track, once things kind of maybe return to the new normal? And so I think there's just a lot of offerings that we're starting to, we're offering. We're seeing a lot of employers offer to help kind of help employees and kind of bridge some of these challenging times.
Right. And Sharlyn, I wonder what your thoughts are. Are you seeing that a lot as you talk to employers across the country, this mental health being such a key concern?
I do agree that, if we think pre-pandemic, organizations were very focused on providing a holistic wellness and well-being package, and that included a mental health component. And now, in light of COVID, I think a lot of people who, from an individual perspective, if we think about employees who might have said, I understand why my employer might be adding a mental health benefit, but I don't really think it's something that I'm going to use very much, might be stepping back now and saying, I've been stretched in ways that I haven't ever had to be stretched before, and I've had to make decisions that I never thought I would ever be making or even have to consider making. And as a result of that, I think more and more employees are looking at their own wellness and well-being. And, Rob was talking about the finance part of this, financial part of this, but not just the emotional piece, not just the physical piece, but financial literacy, is also another key component to talking about wellness and well-being. And this gets back to the conversations that we've been having all along, where we talk about recruiting and retaining our best talent. Employers and employees, if you want to do your best work, you bring your best self. And part of doing that is by making the connection between well-being and being able to do our best work and being productive.
Right. And then, Ellen, that actually makes me think of something you've been talking about lately from the sort of leave perspective. You've been sort of cautioning employers to really be prepared to maybe expect a spike in sort of claims for mental health in the coming months. I know you said recently how they've been, employees have been juggling so many things, right, for months, and there's only a certain amount of juggling we can do. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I think so, Claire, and I think that all employers have to be prepared for that, particularly as a lot of employers I've talked to are starting to come into really phase 3 almost, and that is a lot of employers I've talked to are saying that after Labor Day is when we're really going to start telling employees they have to come back into the office. We might not be giving them a choice anymore. And so I think that's also going to be a trigger for a lot of employees. A lot of employees, they've been juggling everything, but they've been able to work at home. It's been very difficult. And some of them may not be able to just hang on and do that for many more months. So that's something to be prepared for. And I think one of the things that's interesting is the DOL has on their FAQs with the Family First Coronavirus Act, they actually have a question that says something along the lines of, hey, I have employees who've been teleworking and they've been doing great for months. And now they're telling me they can't telework anymore because their child's school is closed and they need leave. Do I have to provide it to them? So it's I think becoming more and more prevalent that employers are struggling with that. And the DOL answer is yes, you have to provide it to them, provided they meet all the other eligibility requirements. So that's certainly something that could happen, is employees who have been juggling, they just can't do it any longer, particularly if they just found out their kid will not be going to school in the fall. They'll be remote learning again, right? So that is that added pressure. But I also want to make sure employers are focused on, if you are going into a phase 3 or a move to really either open your office or have your employees no longer have a choice whether they work in the office and you're requiring them to, be prepared not only for additional mental health claims, possibly FMLA claims, but also be prepared for ADA accommodation requests from employees who feel as if going into the office is dangerous for them for whatever reason. Perhaps it's mental health, perhaps it's a pre-existing health condition, and they're going to ask for work from home as a reasonable accommodation. So just be ready for those and know that they're probably going to come your way. And we're not out of the woods when it comes to employees, asking us for accommodations or asking for leave in various forms.
Right. And at this point, we'll move into the sort of the fourth key insight, and then we'll be shifting to questions. A reminder, do send us your questions. Any and all of them, we'll do our best to answer them. But the fourth, sort of, based on that clear need for benefits right now, or for leave and so on, we were then asking about enrollment. So we asked the question, now thinking about benefits enrollment, what methods is your organization planning to use this year for employees to select their medical and non-medical benefits? We also asked what methods they used last year so that we could have a point of comparison. And this is what the employers told us. So virtual enrollment then replacing face-to-face, that was kind of the key data point that jumped out here. Perhaps, again, not surprisingly, in-person meetings with benefits counselors is reducing. So it was 49% in 2019 to 33% in 2020. Meanwhile, virtual video conference or co-browsing with a benefits counselor is nearly doubling in 2020, going up from 23% in 2019, nearly doubling actually to 42% in 2020. You also see that sort of rise in online self-guided enrollment. So Rob, I would love to ask you, as somebody who oversees this at Unum, any thoughts on what you're seeing here?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the least surprising of a lot of the data. You would expect that employees are going to be seeking alternative ways to enroll in their benefits, and I think it's a good trend, really. I think there's some really excellent tools and platforms out there that really make the enrollment experience a much better customer experience. I think it gives employees the information they need to be better informed consumers. It allows them to kind of look at all their benefits kind of holistically and choose what's right for them. So I think it's a really it's an important trend. I think that there will still always be a place for employees who need to have their questions answered. I mean, enrollment can be a very daunting experience. It can be very complicated, particularly, if you've got multiple medical plans and you've got CDHP or high deductible plans with HSAs and FSAs and all these different choices and options. And I think employees become acutely aware of how important these benefits are. And so they're going to be, they will welcome the support and the advice from their employer. And I think what we've learned and is becoming a more common view of employees is they rely on their employers to give them the tools and also the information to make the right choices. They expect their employees to do that, their employers to do that. And so employers are playing a much more active role in helping employees kind of navigate all these decision points they have to make.
Yeah, and Sharlyn, do you have anything to add to that too? What you're seeing here is maybe a key message for employers.
I think one of the biggest messages for employers has to do with saying to employees, we understand your benefits are important to you. we can't emphasize that enough right now. Employees now more than ever want to know that their benefits package contains the things that's important to them. And, our health is in the news every day. And being in a position where we can tell employees we want you to get the best information in order to make good decisions about your health care, and not only your health care, but your family's health care. I would kind of take that one step further and say one of the great things that we have the ability to do right now as an organization is move up our annual enrollment processes and maybe even extend them so that employees can make the time or make enough time to attend an enrollment meeting, and maybe even create a situation where employees can bring a family member. In some cases, enrollment isn't just an individual decision, it's a family decision. And asking an employee to come to a meeting, virtual or in person, but have them come to a meeting and then remember everything and take all that information home where they discuss it with everyone. And of course, they're not going to be able to answer, Rob was talking about being able to answer questions. They're not going to be able to answer all the questions that their family might have about benefits. This is a real opportunity for employers to do that and sort of step it up a level and provide that extra customer service to individuals.
Such a good point. And, it's even bringing to mind an article I read recently where a sort of neuroscientist was actually talking about something they're calling COVID brain, which is the fact that we're all so overwhelmed right now, right? Change is so fast. There's such disruption right now that already enrollment was perhaps a maybe complicated, difficult to understand process for employees, and then you throw in all the other complexity right now. I think that's such a great point of how employers can be helping employees, even like you said, think about bringing that enrollment earlier. I wanted to move us just to sort of the concluding slide before we move into Q&A. What are some of the conclusions we can make? And certainly we could say certainly COVID-19 has changed the benefits and competitive landscape for the foreseeable future. Rob, you had mentioned this before, and I think it's such an important point of how benefits have been elevated, that perhaps never has there been such a need to understand your benefits, right? To understand what you have in the context of a pandemic. Many employers are responding with increasing the flexibility. Virtual methods of working will be essential. As Ellen, you were saying, that flexibility is going to be central really going ahead. But equally, and as Sharlyn, you've been weighing in that war for talent. So if those employees who are able to work from home, suddenly, of course, you could work for any company. So that benefits package will be important. Rob, I wondered if we could finish maybe with your key takeaways, that idea of how benefits have been elevated.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sharlyn's point is spot on. I think that if there was ever a time when employees appreciate and value the benefits, it's now. And so while there's been it's a very challenging situation for folks. For employees, this is a very difficult time. This, to me, represents an opportunity for employers because they can really take advantage of the fact that they've got their employees' attention. They can really demonstrate the value proposition that they offer as an employer, whether it's the benefits package, whether it's their flexible work schedules, whatever is important to their employees, and this is because they've got their attention. And I think it really is a unique time, and employees will be less focused on in the past they got focused on all sorts of kind of different benefit kinds. They were talking about pet insurance. They're talking about something, all these different kinds of things. They're going to be very focused on the key things around their financial stability and having medical insurance. And so I think it's a great time to take advantage of that level of attention and reinforce the messages that you want to reinforce with your employees about what you offer as a company. And the other takeaway for me is I think it's really important to keep talking to your employees and reaching out to them and making sure you understand kind of where they are, what their challenges are, and how your benefits can help them make the transition and thrive in a very challenging time. And so I think it's a great time to be able to really reach out and stay in touch and work and help your employees.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all our speakers for sort of walking us through those different data points. So we're going to, at this point, sort of turn it over to our audience to ask questions. Rob, I've got one here I might direct towards you. How might the pandemic change the way employers think about their benefits portfolios?
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to some of the earlier comments, which is I think people's expectations, employees' expectations about what's important has changed. And so I think it's an excellent time to step back and really make sure that the portfolio that you've got is optimized, and that you've got the right things in your portfolio to attract and retain the best employees. I also think it's a good opportunity to reevaluate the mix of benefits. And is there an opportunity to maybe unembed some of those fixed costs and move to more variable costs to give you more flexibility, in a very challenging financial time. So I think there's just some opportunities there that, these things that come along, once in a while, and you can take advantage of that opportunity to kind of reevaluate where you are and what you're trying to accomplish with your overall strategy.
Wonderful. Here's a question for Sharlyn. You mentioned working from home 2.0. What types of things are you seeing employers do to help employees adjust?
A few things. One, organizations are starting to offer employees some sort of stipend to maybe cover their internet cost. If a person is working from home, maybe they are having to upgrade their internet in order to have more bandwidth in order to do things, or Zoom meetings, or whatever the case may be. So you're seeing employers start to talk about that. The second thing that I'm hearing employers start to do are things that have to do with physical equipment. For example, if employees can bring a monitor home with them, or giving them the ability to purchase a second monitor. If you have ever worked with two monitors before, you know that it's a dream, and especially if you are spending a lot of time at, working in the same place. It's one thing if you're remote and you have a laptop because you want that flexibility of, having it with you all the time. But if you're going to be at home, can you use a monitor in your laptop, that kind of thing. I'm also hearing a lot about chairs. People wanting to, it sounds really sexy to, work from your bed or the sofa or whatever, but having good posture and good ergonomics is all the thing that's important. And then the final thing that I'm hearing more organizations start to spend some time talking about are how do we train managers to work in this results-oriented work environment. Ellen mentioned it earlier during our time together where we were talking about the flexibility of employees. How managers might have been used to managing employees just by walking around and, I see Sharlyn working, so I know she's doing stuff. And now that I'm working remotely, it's not the same. But how do we give managers good tools to make sure that they're still staying connected with employees, that engagement is still happening, that employees don't feel disconnected from the organization? So I see that kind of training or coaching for managers as being another part of work from home 2.0.
That's such a great, valid point. And by the way, I did order my chair. So 2 questions here, which are quite similar. So we're an employer with less than 50 employees. Will we have more, and so Ellen, I'm going to direct this towards you. Will we have more restrictions around paid leave than before when we didn't have to comply? The second question kind of gets to a similar area there around paid leave with employers with less than 50 employees.
Right. So one of the things employers need to be careful about is obviously most employers, the first thing they think of when it comes to leave obligations is FMLA, which does apply to employers with 50 or more employees. But there are a host of paid leave laws at the state and municipal level that already exist that mandate that smaller employers do provide paid leave to their employees in certain circumstances. So you want to make sure you're familiar with those laws as well. Some of them go down to, employers that only have 5 employees, for instance. So make sure you're fully aware of what your state obligations are as well. And remember that the FFCRA applies to employers with less than 500 employees. So that will apply as well. There are some exemptions that smaller employers may be able to take advantage of, but for the most part, that law already does exist and does apply. It applies to those smaller employers that the core FMLA or the traditional FMLA excludes, but they are not excluded by the FFCRA.
Great, thank you for that. Rob, a question here for you. What other impacts to the employee experience should we anticipate in the future? Any suggestions, best practices on how to get ahead of these?
Yeah, I think the employee experience is going to change. And as we've talked about, it's going to be more digital. I think it's going to increasingly get more digital. I think a great example of that is the increase, for example, in the use of telehealth. Employees now we've seen in the past fairly low adoption rates of things like telehealth, either whether it's for medical or for behavioral health kind of issues. I think you're going to see an increase in the use of those, and we have seen an increase in the use of those kinds of digital tools. We've also seen an increase in all sorts of various apps and tools that employees can either download free or employers can provide that help with things like mindfulness and stress and all those and those kinds of issues as well. So I think what you're gonna see is a lot more digital tools that are going to be available to employees to help them deal with a variety of challenges that they have, and employees will kind of be expecting these tools to be available to them. I also think, and as most employers know, you've got, 4 or 5 generations in the workforce. And so I think you're going to continue to see benefit portfolios, the mix of benefit portfolios changed in order to meet the different needs of those different demographics. And so I think the days of having kind of a vanilla kind of benefit offering where everybody kind of gets the same thing, I think that is going to shift dramatically, and you're going to see benefits that meet people where they are, and it's going to vary across the board. And so I think the experience is going to be, how do you deliver those benefits and communicate to your employees and educate them about those benefits and keep them contemporary and fresh is going to be a challenge for many employers.
Right. And we also have some paid leave questions coming in, and Ellen, I'm going to sort of send this to you first. Rob, you might have thoughts on this, and I'm not sure you can answer it, but here's the question. What suggestions do you have for employers to help pay for an expansion of paid leave, because right now it's covered by the government, so the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So this would be employers with under 500 employees. Ellen, any thoughts there?
Right. So I think this is getting at, it does say it's provided by the government, but it's actually provided by employers and mandated by the government. But there are tax credits available for leave paid under the FFCRA. So one of the things you want to make sure is you're talking to your accountants and making sure you understand what, if any, tax credits you might be eligible for. That's really important. I think I'm going to leave it to Rob to where do you find the money in your benefits program, perhaps to pay for this. But I think you do want to make sure you're taking advantage of all of the different government programs that are available for you, particularly in response to to COVID, and make sure you know what you're entitled to there by way of tax credits and things like that. So, Rob, I'm going to ask you if you have any suggestions on where do employers find the dough to fund this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I haven't figured that one out myself yet, actually. I think a lot of it is, again, and I've said this before, that's kind of, is you kind of look at the whole portfolio and you have to kind of prioritize what you're offering and do all those things. Are they still relevant? And can you switch something out for something else? I would look at your overall PTO program, and is there opportunities within that program to change the definition of how some of those leaves are used? So I think the best answer is you've got to be creative and figure out where the opportunities are. But that will be and continue to be that, for anybody that's in the benefits world, that is the biggest challenge, is how do you offer more without basically expanding the pie.
Right. And I think we'll finish actually with a question that Sharlyn, I'm going to send to you. It's a great question to end on, actually, because it's really looking ahead. How can we sell the rest of the HR team on moving up annual enrollment?
Oh, I think for me, one of the biggest selling points is from a customer service perspective. Claire, you were talking about earlier how frustrating, draining it can be right now to sort of think about all things pandemic. I've heard it called, caution fatigue. Maybe you've heard the same term. But the idea that one of the things that often provides employees a huge amount of comfort is getting their new insurance cards. Just as simple as, it's that time of year, I want to know that I have my coverage, and the way that I can do that is by having an insurance card. When I go to the doctor, that's the first thing that they ask for. Moving the process up could allow HR the time that they need to process everything and get that off to the insurance company so that cards end up in employees' hands and everybody can rest easy that they have the information that they need when they, seek medical attention. So that can be a huge comfort and provide a high level of customer service coming out of the Human Resources Department.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all our speakers for joining us, and for all our audience members. We're so grateful you could join us. Stay connected. We've got a few links here. You can actually read that report. We'll be sending you the deck and the recording later today, so you can access these links in your inbox. You can also listen to our podcast, HR Trends. Everyone speaking today has appeared on that podcast. It's a good sort of way to get some good advice into your phone. And also the upcoming webinar in August. We'll be sending out invitations soon, and we'll let you all know about that. Thank you, everyone, and please join us next time, and stay safe and stay well.